talk about disaster planning for horse owners. Indian River County does have quite a few equines and agricultural areas. So we're going to talk about some of the very scary things that can occur that you can actually prevent with pre-planning for our horse friends. This is our Humane Society. We are located at 6230 77th Street in Vero Beach. And we do have adoption services, lost and found services. If you have lost an animal, if you lost your horse, you're welcome to call our receiving center and file a lost report. And we do coordinate with Indian River County Agricultural Unit so that they're aware that your animals are missing. We've been serving our community since 1953. We have our lost and found services, adoption services, cruelty investigations, pet behavior training, free pet ID tags, and we'll talk about those pet ID tags as a form of identification in a little while. I've actually used them and braided them into the mane of my horses for identification when I didn't have any other options. We do offer disaster assistance, and we have a pet-friendly shelter. Our website has a lost and found component to it, and you can actually go to that website, which is hsvb.org, and you can download a flyer where you can plug in a photograph of your animal and a phone number, and we would encourage you to go ahead and spread these throughout your entire neighborhood if your animal is missing, because that can happen during an event. So these flyers are very, very helpful in getting your community to watch out for your horse. Some of the other services that we provide is we have our wellness clinic, humane education, public education and pet behavior counseling, private euthanasia of pets by owner request, and then foster care of pets during an emergency. Those services are limited to our first responders who have no other option to care for their animals other than to leave them at home, which we definitely don't want to happen, or our residents that are registered with our special needs shelter. And those services are limited to companion animals. Unfortunately, we cannot house livestock. We do co-chair Emergency Services Function 17, which is our community's animal services. And some of the things to remember is there are between 79 and 80,000 companion animals residing in our community. And there are only 1,000 to 2,000 kennel spaces available for those animals. Secure horse boarding facilities that are safe during a disaster event are even more scarce than that. So it is essential that owners plan for their livestock during an event. If you have a mini horse, he's going to suggest that if you are leaving, he wants to leave with you, but his little hooves can't reach the gas pedals, and thank goodness he can't drive. But he should have a plan to where he can be safe. Some of the scenarios that we're going to cover here are hurricane, floods, and fire. You'll want to develop a plan and write it down. Provide copies of that plan to those who will be helping in implementing it. Post your plan in your barn. Develop a checklist. Assign written duties ahead of time. And practice your plans. You'll want to have at least 3 separate forms of identification for each of your horses. If you're lucky, your horse has been freeze branded by a veterinarian, or you've had a microchip implanted. The picture located in the center of your screen is a picture of a microchip. It is about the size of a grain of rice, and it's implanted roughly where your horse's withers are located. And that has a barcode, and those numbers are actually tied directly to your emergency contact information. So if your animal is found, we'll be able to get in touch with you. You can actually weave identification into the mane of your horse, and you'll see 2 photos depicted here. One is our simple pet ID tag, which is located on the lower right hand of your screen, which again will help us identify your animal. Or commercially, if you look at the top right of your screen, there is something called an ICE, I-C-E, horse identification tag. They're very, very secure. They can be clipped into your horse's mane or his tail, and it has all your essential identification inside. In an emergency, livestock markers are cattle markers, which are available at our local feed stores. As you'll see in the picture on the top left, you could actually put your name on there, your phone number. And this is one of our horses that we have here that we had here at the Humane Society, and he was prepared and ready during our storms in 2017 and 2018. And then again, the identification tag placed on a breakaway halter. This is something that we all need to remember. Nylon halters will not break if your horse becomes entangled. They can actually injure your animal and even cause a life-threatening situation. So you will definitely want to make sure that you have a breakaway halter that has a leather strap that goes over the pole that can break in the event that your horse becomes entangled. You'll want a plan to shelter in place if your barn's been declared safe by a licensed inspector and the wind load has been determined. There is always a consensus. Usually 50% of the people feel their horses are better left outdoors or their horses are better left indoors. We need to think about tornadoes also that can be associated with our hurricanes. So that is really an owner preference, and we're just bringing to light your different options. Your fences should be strong, and they should be the type of fence that's not going to collect debris that'll push a fence over in a flood area, much like the fence on the lower right-hand side. And on the lower left-hand side, you'll see what happens in a floodwater when all that debris hits that fence, and it may come down. So you also want to make sure that you're not in a flood zone and that your animals have access to both high and low ground. If you're planning to shelter in place, you're going to want to make sure that you're not in an evacuation area, that you have the necessary resources to ensure that you and your animals can be safe for at least a week. Road flooding and downed debris will not restrict access to your livestock. You'll want to make sure that emergency responders would be able to get to you after the event if the need be. You'll also want to make sure that you have plenty of water in place, plenty of food, and that your food is not subjected to flooding. So the things that you need to look at if you need to evacuate is your barn or shelter not structurally safe if you're located in that flood zone or that evacuation zone. If you're in an evacuation area and your fencing is not secure, or if it contains barbed wire, as you can see from the photos here, it is crucial that your animals be removed and that you plan to evacuate, because unfortunately many animals do perish in a storm situation. The other thing that you'll want to consider is, are there overhead power lines that could come down on your barn or on your pastures? Those are really a life-threatening concern with animals that are turned out. If your pastures don't have high or low areas, or if our pastures are too small, often we hear that animals should be turned out during an event, and that works beautifully if you have large pastures where animals can take shelter in a ravine or in a stand of trees. But if you're located on a 5-acre plot and those animals are fenced in and it's subjected to flooding, your fencing's not secure, there are power lines, those are the kind of things that prevent the animals from seeking safe shelter and following their instincts. So the most important thing also is don't wait too long, or you're going to be stranded on the highway. And we've all seen our congested roads, and there's nothing worse than being stranded for hours on end on a highway with your horses in a trailer in 100-degree weather, because that's usually what happens if you don't leave in enough time. So you'll want a fully packed go kit for each one of your horses. You'll want to make sure ahead of time, ahead of hurricane season, that their vaccinations and their Coggins tests are all up to date and in place in your go kit. Keep copies. Keep a copy of your livestock inventory and emergency contact numbers clearly posted, either in the barn or with you where your horses are located. Feed for 1 week secured in airtight and watertight containers. Hay for at least 1 week securely covered, and that'll be stored up off the ground. You'll want at least 15 to 20 gallons of water per horse per day, stored securely for a 1 week supply. Horses generally drink about 8 gallons of water a day during their during a normal day. In stressful conditions, especially in higher heat environments, they can drink more. If you are sheltering at home, you're going to want to consider installing a hand pump on your well, because if your electric goes out and you don't have a generator, you're not going to be able to get water to your livestock. You'll also want a fully equipped first aid kit. Check with your equine veterinarian, and they will be more than happy to give you tips on what needs to be included in that, especially for emergency situations when they can't respond. Horses can get very, very stressed during storms, and so they may need a variety of different medications. You'll also want to shut off all main electrical breakers, close off any gas and water lines to your barn, and this is going to reduce the risk of fire. You'll want to chain and clearly label all hazardous material containers such as propane and gas tanks if they're above ground. Trailer ties that we use for our mobile homes are great for this. You'll use web strapping and strap those securely so they can't become flying objects. Any debris, lumber, things that you have stored around your property will need to be removed or secured. And then consider again, like I said, using those mobile home ties to secure that equipment. After the hurricane, there are a list of things that you're probably going to need, and those will be things like chainsaws, a ladder, axes, shovels, pry bars, a come-along to help you put your fences back up, metal cable, maybe a block and tackle, wire cutters, and all the fencing supplies that you may need to make repairs. You'll want to have adequate and up-to-date insurance on both your facility and on your animals, if that's something you've chosen to do. And again, current photographs or a video of your facility and all the animals that you have located there. So planning is essential. It reduces the stress associated with disasters. And it can be a really stressful time because these are animals that weigh in excess of 1,000 pounds and they're not easy to transport. So you'll also want to make sure that your horse knows how to load in a horse trailer. If you do have to evacuate, find a safe place to stay with either friends or family, a prearranged boarding stable, a safe pasture that's large enough for your horse to follow his instincts and seek safety, an approved livestock evacuation center. There are a number of hurricane-friendly websites that pop up on Facebook and Instagram during disasters that will give you evacuation areas either in-state or out-of-state where you can transport your horses safely. So again, planning is the key to ensuring that your horses are safe, even if your destination isn't local. Please do not wait until the last minute to plan for those disasters. So, and the consequences of not planning. You know, the storm is starting to approach, or a wildfire is starting to approach, or the floodwaters are rising, and you have a horse that's not used to being loaded in a horse trailer. Or you don't have a plan in place, and it's a last-minute thing. It's very, very difficult for our animals and very stressful. And then, unfortunately, it puts others' lives at risk when they have to go out and they have to rescue those animals that are now in peril because they can't survive in the conditions that they're living in. So on a happier note, these are some survivors of our equine program at the Humane Society. This is Billy. Billy came to the Humane Society severely emaciated. It was part of a cruelty case. And 2 years later, you'll see a picture of Billy on the right-hand side. Billy has been completely rehabilitated, actually chose to evacuate during the hurricanes in 2017 that were approaching Indian River County, and ended up being adopted by a family up in Maryland because they actually first evacuated to Ocala, and then as the storm shifted, they ended up going to North Carolina. And then as the weather started approaching up there, they decided to take their horses to Maryland to keep them safe, and a kind woman up there fell in love with him and adopted him. So hurricanes can actually sometimes be an advantage. It was definitely for Billy. This is Rosie. Rosie was a mare that arrived with Billy. She was severely emaciated. And unbeknownst to us, once we got her to our facility and the veterinarian checked on Rosie, it was determined that not only was she so emaciated that her ribs and hip bones were sticking out, but she was also pregnant. Lucky for Rosie, she wasn't too far along, and she was able to deliver a healthy foal and eventually ended up going to Cleveland Amory's Black Beauty Ranch in Murchison, Texas, where she is living happily ever after. And then the horse that you saw in the earlier identification photos, this is Mac. He's a 29-year-old horse that was rescued from a cruelty situation. And the picture on top is Mac the day he was confiscated. And the picture below is a picture of Mac 7 months later. So again, he wears his identification proudly during hurricanes, and we do have a plan for Mac. So we would like to thank you. For more information on any livestock needs that you may have, you can contact me, Ilka Daniel, Director of Animal Protective Services with the Humane Society of Vero Beach and Indian River County. My phone number is 772-571-6408, and my email is the letter I, Daniel, DANIEL, @hsvb.org. Thank you very much.